I think that what storytellers do who are writers is they take that natural instinct and the rhythms of storytelling and apply craft to it and try to make it into something more or less permanent. But it's a very natural thing. And when you see a friend who says, oh, I've got such a story to tell, you won't believe this, you know, there's a little thrill because we all want to hear that.
Can you talk about haunting? Things that haunt you?
You know, I think that one of the things that still kind of amazes me is just being alive.
Yes.
Like, I'm here in this body, in this room. I can't tell you why. Some scientists could tell you what they think. Some religious folks could tell you what they think. But this, like, the miracle of this moment of being alive is something I can't fully explain. It seems very, very like precious and valuable, though I often forget this. But it's this odd experience, I think, that haunts me. This, like, being aware of being alive, being aware of that moment passing.
Now, a couple years ago, my dad apologized for not giving me a more traumatic childhood to draw artistic inspiration from, and I told him he had nothing to be sorry for. Now, good literature should make us understand who we are and where we come from, and I came to a whole new understanding of where I come from. I come from a family of lunatics. Now, several of them are in the audience tonight. And I suspect I'm going to be getting some interesting emails from my dad tomorrow. But in all seriousness, I'm honored beyond words to be this year's recipient of the Simpson Prize. It has already allowed me the freedom to pursue my next novel without distraction or interruption, and it offers the most precious luxury a writer can imagine, the time to sit in a quiet space and work, and hopefully at the end of this, we'll emerge with a book that is worthy of the generosity and faith you have bestowed on me.
It was a wonderful thrill to be the recipient of the Joyce Carol Oates Prize awarded by the Simpson Literary Project, and a distinct honor to be among such fine finalists as Rachel Kushner, Valeria Luiselli, Sigrid Nunez, Anne Raef, and Amor Tolles. The Joyce Carol Oates Prize came at just the right time. I was getting ready to publish a novel called The Other Americans, which is about a family that is brought together again following the death of their father in a hit-and-run accident in the Mojave Desert. As always, I didn't know what to expect, whether the book would find readers, whether it would resonate with people. When I heard about the prize a couple of weeks before publication, it gave me a great boost of confidence as I set out to promote The Other Americans. But the Joyce Carol Oates Prize also did something much more pragmatic, which is that it helped me with work in progress.
I love it when a reader asks, like, about a sentence. It's rare, but they'll ask about a sentence, like, how did this sentence come to be? How did you choose to use these words? It takes a lot of courage to embark on a novel. I'm happy with the book in the end, but there were periods of time during that. You know, whenever you hear writers say something took 14 years, like, those aren't like sort of happy years of just like rejoicing in the creative process. And as I was writing it, like, I would constantly come back to it, sort of like remind myself, like, you know, ultimately what I'm trying to explore is this idea. What is it like to become a physician? And in a way, that's what, you know, kicked much of the book off, was thinking about my time early in training. I mean, even now, these moments where both the thrill as well as sort of the terror of the responsibilities that taking care of someone else entail come into play. And so I think it was exploring that. Mm-hmm. I don't feel, you know, fortunately my life has not been as dramatic and interesting as my protagonist's life. I mean, that's all of us, I'd say. Thank you so much. I'm still so honored to receive this prize, and I'm hoping we'll get to do as many of the projects as have been planned in years past. But I think one thing about the crisis is bringing out new creative ways of interacting with the world. So I think we'll be able to come up with a lot.
Good evening to all of you out there in Zoom land. We are thrilled to have you joining us tonight for this exciting opportunity to meet the 2021 Joyce Carol Oates finalists. Danielle's comments, which were recorded April of last year, were prescient. One of the silver linings of this last year is that at the project, we have reconceived how to share the stories of our finalists with a broader audience using Zoom. This is our 5th annual prize, a prize of $50,000 awarded to a mid-career author of fiction who has a distinguished reputation and the approbation and gratitude of readers. Our project was co-founded 6 years ago by the esteemed University of California, Berkeley English Department, and in conjunction with the beloved Bay Area institution, Lafayette Library and Learning Center. We believe that storytellers and teachers animate a literate and democratic society. That's our vision. In addition to our annual prize, we have many other initiatives. I'm only going to tell you about one other one tonight. And that is, I'd like to share with you about our writing workshops. Annually, we host creative writing workshops at high schools and after-school programs throughout the Bay Area. Even with the pandemic, we've been able to expand the writing workshops. In fact, they're happening right now, and they're led by creative writing teachers from UC Berkeley. Students participating in our workshops are often the first in their families to attend college. These teenagers have the opportunity to be published in Simpsonistas, Tales from the Simpson Literary Project. This is Simpsonistas 2, which we published last year. Simpsonistas 3 is coming out next month, and it's an annual anthology of fiction, poetry, and essays. Being published alongside these distinguished writers, including Joyce and our finalists, can be life-changing experience for our young people. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our friends at the House of SpeakEasy, with whom we are delighted to be co-hosting tonight's program.
Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you so much, Diane. We're thrilled to be with all of you tonight. And we're going to bring you a little taste of how House of SpeakEasy organizes our evenings. And we're delighted to partner with the Simpson Literary Project. I'm joined tonight by my co-host and co-founder of House of SpeakEasy, Amanda Foreman. And you'll get a sense of the finalists tonight through their storytelling, and followed by a conversation with Joyce Carol Oates. Amanda Foreman.
Thank you, Lucas. And thank you, Diane, and House of SpeakEasy. We are so thrilled to be able to align our mission with yours. House of SpeakEasy is a literary non-profit, and we are devoted to connecting communities through books and storytelling. We host a monthly cabaret on stage, although at the moment it's virtual. We also offer college readiness programs to under-resourced high schools. And through our traveling bookmobile, we deliver free books to book deserts throughout the 5 boroughs of New York and across the country. It's such a wonderful opportunity, and we are so delighted to be a part of tonight's event. And now, on to the show.
Hello, everyone. Usually I'm behind the scenes at House of SpeakEasy. I'm Erin Cox, and I'm the executive producer. And tonight, I'm the MC of the show portion of tonight's program. So tonight, each of our speakers will be telling stories tied to the theme, The Day I Realized. Throughout the show, we encourage viewers to share questions in the chat, which we'll include in our conversation with the finalists just after the show. So if something comes up during a story that you want to ask about, put it in the chat, and we'll try and get to it at the end in the conversation. Our first speaker tonight is Darren Strauss. Darren is the National Book Critics Circle award-winning author of Chang and Eng, The Real McCoy, More Than It Hurts You, Half a Life, and most recently, The Queen of Tuesday. He also has a comic book series with Adam Dalva called Olivia Twist. Darren is a clinical professor at NYU. And Darren, thanks for taking the stage and kicking off our show.
Oh, thank you, Erin. Thanks to everybody. It's really a huge thrill to be here, to be nominated, as they say, with so many talented writers, and it's so nice and honor. It's incredible. Thank you. Wow, I'm more nervous than I thought I would be. Okay, when I learned my kids weren't me. Want to know selfless love? Have children. Want to shed vanity the way an oak loses a dead leaf, or be as magnanimous as the sun in spring? Raise a couple kids. That's what they say anyhow. But is it true? Well, let me back up and tell you a key fact. I have identical sons. Really, my first book featured twins, and then I had a set of my own. My boys spent their first days in the intensive care unit at the very same time that I handed in a book about a neonatal intensive care unit. That book follows an 8-month-old, and my own kids turned 8, the 8 months, the day the book came out. You get the idea. Lesson is be careful. Sometimes I think writing sends out invisible lines of otherworldly power, but that's a different talk. Anyway, I have identical sons, similar faces, dissimilar personalities. Yet one day they were in preschool, and each boy happened to say the same thing, a thing that shocked me. It was career day. What do you want to be when you grow up? And both in separate classrooms answered, I don't know what I want to be, but I know I don't want to be a writer. Don't want to be a writer. This hurt. This was a kick in the old ego. Know how Larkin says, they fuck you up, your mom and dad? Well, they fucked me up, my kids. I must have screwed the pooch somewhere. No, my son Shepard said, his chin lifted a few rungs. I just don't like writing. This got me thinking, what was parenthood for? I can only speak for myself and my own failings. For me, I'm sad to admit, parenthood had been another way to try to imprint myself on the face of the world. I must have screwed the pooch, I thought. I must have screwed the pooch, as if their future were about me. Vanity. But I wasn't alone. I went to a parenting magazine's website, and the headline was, "It is about you. Why being a selfish, not selfless parent is good for you." Google it, I'm not kidding. But as happens so often with growing older, the pillars of the temple of vanity have begun to crumble away. The challenge is to supply their places with other pillars. It's work, for me anyway, to remove the self and merely to love. I think selfless love is kind of like a UFO. Many talk about it, few have seen it. The best I can do is have my binoculars out. And then you hope if you see it, you can spread it all over. I plan to try. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Darren. That was a great way to start the show. Wait, don't leave yet. We're going to talk for a second about how painful that must have been when your children said they didn't want to be writers.
Well, it was the thing about it that was so funny was that they both said it in separate classrooms, and they both said in the same way. I don't know what I want to do. I just know I don't want to do what Dad does, which, you know, I did experience as kind of a slap, but it's not about me, you know?
It's not about you, but no, we do fun things. Writing is fun, right? Isn't it? Maybe that's a question for the conversation at the end, whether or not.
I think it's fun. It's fun to have done the thing, but it's not fun always to do the thing.
Do the thing. Got it. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for kicking off our show, and we'll talk to you again shortly.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Darren. Our next storyteller is Danielle Evans, and Danielle is the award-winning author of the story collections, The Office of Historical Corrections, and Before You Suffocate Your Own Fool Self. She teaches in the writing seminars at Johns Hopkins University, and Danielle, the stage is all yours. Take it away.
Hello. Thank you, everyone, for putting this together, and I'm so excited to get to talk to everyone. Thank you all for being here. So I was originally planning to tell a story about the day I realized I was a strange child, but I realized that was a very, very short story, like 3 sentences long, which I guess explains why everyone else knew that decades before I did. So instead, I'm going to tell a story that might provide some insight into why I was a strange child. This is the story of the day I realized summer camp was not for me. So the summer between 5th and 6th grade, I got admitted to a fancy summer camp for nerds at UVA. One of those where like you have to send a baby college application to get in. I had skipped a grade and was young for going into 6th grade. I was almost but not quite 10. And my mother, may she rest in peace, was proud of me for getting accepted, but incredibly skeptical of the whole concept of camp. She thought camp was something white children did, and even though this camp was taking place on a college campus and we'd be staying in the dorms, she sort of generally believed summer camp was a place where nature conspired to try to kill you. So there were a series of challenges I had to complete in order to get her to let me go to camp at all. I don't remember all of them. I think I had to braid my hair. I had to iron something because that's what the kids do at camp, iron. And even though it wasn't that kind of camp, I think there was some kind of outdoorsy challenge, but I finally passed them all. And so my mother had to keep her end of the deal and let me go. This was before ubiquitous internet. It was the mid-90s and well before anyone, especially children, carried cell phones. So the rule of camp that most upset my mother was that I would not be able to call her for 2 weeks, since camp didn't have enough time or phones for every child to be calling their parents all day. The rule was nobody could except in emergencies. This, to my mother, was further evidence that camp was sinister because what kind of a place would collect children and not let them phone home? So the second part of the camp deal was that I had to write a letter every single day, starting as soon as I got there. To make sure that she'd heard from me as soon as possible, my mother went to the post office to do something I didn't know was possible. She got special barcoded envelopes that were supposed to make the mail get there faster. Mind you, the mail was getting from Charlottesville, Virginia to Alexandria, Virginia, less than 2 hours by car. These barcoded envelopes were somewhat at odds with one of my camp goals, which was to finally have a reason to use my fancy pink stationery. So I promised to use the special envelopes for the first few days so she'd know I was okay, and then switch. I did exactly that, but it turns out the special envelopes were a bad idea because they routed the mail through the nearest major sorting facility. Instead of going from Virginia to Virginia, my letters were going through DC and taking longer to get there. So I'd written long, detailed letters about settling in and making friends, and my poetry workshop, which was the delightful kind of poetry workshop where no one tells you you're bad at poetry because you're 10, but my mother got none of those letters for the first week of camp. She did get the letter I sent on normal stationery where, having already spent a week filling her in on all of the details of camp, I wrote to say I was keeping my promise to write daily, but I didn't feel well enough to write much because I had an upset stomach, had taken some medicine, and skipped dinner to go to bed early. I didn't think the letter was particularly alarming. I had stomach aches all the time, and I had no way of knowing it would be the first letter my mother got from me in over a week. Meanwhile, for some reason, Nerd Camp had a camp dance, which obviously none of the kids who were cool enough to have fun at a 6th grade dance were at Nerd Camp. So predictably, at the big dance, all of the girls sat on the bleachers and all of the boys stood by the stacks, and the enormous gym floor remained sad and empty. One brave boy, Trevor, kept walking halfway across the gym toward the wall of girls, then abruptly and conspicuously turning around. We gossiped about who we wanted to ask to dance. Eventually, we formed a small committee of girls to walk past the boys and secure some snacks from the snack table to bring back to the bleachers. As we passed, one boy said to his friend, "That's the girl Trevor wants to dance with." And his chivalrous young friend said, "What girl? The one with the boobs?" and pointed at me. I, being unaccustomed to having breasts, let alone having them pointed at, resolved to sit back down and never ever get up again, because I imagined if I had to get up and dance with a boy, all of the other boys would point and laugh. Unfortunately, just as I had reached the conclusion that I would stay on the bleachers forever, Trevor finally worked up the nerve to cross the gym and ask me to dance. I said no, emphatically, almost reflexively, and poor Trevor started to cry and ran out of the gym. A group of girls went to comfort him while the girls inside told me I was mean. I didn't know how to explain that they didn't understand, and because they didn't have breast yet. Plus, I actually did like Trevor, who was the only other Black child at Nerd Camp, so I went outside to apologize to him and tell him I just hadn't felt like dancing before, but I'd really like to dance with him now. We made our way to the center of the still otherwise empty gym floor to awkwardly slow dance to "I Can Love You Like That" by All for One, an arm's length apart. And just as we began to awkwardly sway and the story approached a very adorable conclusion, the campus police walked into the gym. They apparently asked for me by name because after talking to them, a counselor walked up to me, tapped me on the shoulder, and brought me to them, at which point I started sobbing, assuming someone was dead or I was in trouble, because why else would the police be escorting me out of a summer camp dance? Outside in the hallway, I learned that in fact, the issue was my mother had been calling the camp for several days after receiving my last letter. They kept telling her I was fine and it was against the rules to put me on the phone, and she told them either they would put her child on the phone or she was calling security, and well, my mother didn't bluff. The police had come to make sure that camp was not mistreating me and to insist I be allowed to call my mother, which I did, only to tell her that her suspicion that camp would be a traumatic experience for me had perhaps become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Danielle, that was so good. Oh my gosh. I'm guessing you didn't go back to camp after that.
Not for many years. I didn't go back to camp until I was an adult and went to like writer camp.
Oh my gosh. I love you're about to have this really sweet moment and then the campus police show up.
Then you started dating some girl named Hillary.
Oh my gosh.
She got over me very quickly, Travis.
I don't know. Oh my gosh. That's almost worse, I think. I don't know. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for that fantastic story. I totally relate. I think a lot of us had horrors at camp, although your horror might have been worse. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next storyteller is Lysley Tenorio. Lysley is the award-winning author of the novel The Son of Good Fortune and the story collection Monstrous. He is a professor at St. Mary's College of California. Lysley, thank you for taking our stage.
Thank you so much, Erin, and thank you for bringing all of us together. This is such wonderful company to be in, and I really do appreciate and feel very fortunate to be nominated with everybody. And thanks everyone out there for coming. Okay, so it's storytelling time. My story is called The Day I Realized Ewoks Are Filipino. So my story should begin by acknowledging a controversy. I'm going to begin with possibly a triggering statement, but this is my truth. My favorite Star Wars movie was Return of the Jedi. Now, I know Empire Strikes Back is the best one. I get it, but just hear me out. So it's 1983. I am sitting in a San Diego movie theater with my older brother and my older sister, and we're watching Return of the Jedi. And we're at that scene when Luke Skywalker and company are on planet Endor and they get captured by the Ewoks. And for those who don't remember, the Ewoks are the little space alien teddy bears with the stubby little spears. Now, if you remember, the Ewoks actually mistake C-3PO as a god. And so all the Ewoks are gathered around him, gossiping in some made up alien Ewok language. But then I notice in the corner of the screen, there's an Ewok who's sort of pointing at C-3PO, and the Ewok says, "Ayon, maganda," which in Tagalog, in Filipino, translates roughly to, "Look over there, nice." And I'm sitting in the theater thinking, did that Ewok just speak in Tagalog? Did anyone else hear that? And so I nudge my sister and I whisper, "I think Ewoks are Filipino." But she just shushes me and tells me to watch the movie. I don't bring it up again, but as we're walking out of the theater, I'm thinking, man, we have made it. We have arrived. Filipinos are in Star Wars, sort of. Anyway, so flash forward to college. I'm in my junior year at UC Berkeley, and I'm taking a course called English 180E, taught by a professor named, it's the history of the short story. It's taught by a professor named Bharati Mukherjee. I didn't know who she was at the time, but I had learned that she was a very successful and respected and accomplished writer. So one night I'm sitting in my very cold apartment off Telegraph Avenue. I remember it was so cold, I had tube socks on my arms just to stay warm because we didn't have heat. I'm sitting in my apartment and I decide to pick up her book, The Middleman and Other Stories, which I still have and bring with me everywhere. And I open up to a story called Fighting for the Rebound. And I read these lines. Blanquita comes through the door wearing lavender sweats and over them a frilly see-through apron. Back in Manila, she took a crash course in making nice to Americans before her father sent her over. In her family, they called her baby. I'm reading these lines and it hits me. In 20 years of reading, this is the first Filipino character I've seen in American fiction. Seeing Blanquita on the page made me realize what I wasn't seeing. Me, my family, my friends, people like us. Filipinos have literally been in America for centuries, but I wasn't seeing them in books, wasn't hearing them on the radio, wasn't seeing them on TV. wasn't seeing him in the movies. But then I remembered, ayun, there. The last time I had seen even a remote kind of representation of Filipino culture, Filipino-ness, was that time some actor in an Ewok costume probably randomly decided to throw a couple words of Tagalog out into the movie. And as a kid, I remember thinking, this is awesome. And I felt grateful, I felt included. But later I thought, that's what I should be grateful for? 2 measly words of Tagalog thrown into a movie, and suddenly I feel like I'm seeing myself on the screen? Filipinos deserve more than that. We've been here a long time. They deserve to be in the story. They deserve to be in the story. They deserve to be the story, is what I meant. So anyway, I'm sitting in my apartment, tube socks on my hands, thinking about all this, and I know that something's wrong in the world. Something is missing, and I don't know how to make it right. But I continue reading The Middleman, and I finish the book, and I put it down, and I take off the socks from my hands, and I start writing. And that's my story.
I think you're doing the most important thing. You're writing, and you're writing Filipino characters into the world and giving people, themselves to see, right? I think that's so important. But I did wonder, had nobody ever made that Ewok connection before? It's so interesting.
People have made that connection.
Oh, they have.
I've Googled it on YouTube. Another Filipino writer actually mentions it in her novel.
So really?
The secret's out.
The secret's out. The secret's out. Well, we're gonna share this story, and more people will see it, and it won't be a secret at all anymore. So awesome! Thank you so much, Lysley. That was really a really important story. Thank you.
So much.
Thank you. Our final storyteller is writer and editor Jenny Offil. Jenny is the author of the critically acclaimed novels Last Things, Department of Speculation, and most recently, Weather. She teaches at Bard College. Jenny, will you join us on stage?
Hello.
All right, take it away.
Yeah, okay, a tough act to follow. Those were great stories. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here in this fine company. The story I'm going to tell is about the day that I realized I had more time. I sometimes think that worrying about time is kind of an occupational hazard for writers. Not only because you have to consider how to construct time fictionally in your work, but also because, in my experience, trying to write a book takes a lot of time. And this is not true for everyone, but the fastest I've ever written a novel is 6.5 years. And the longest it's ever taken me is 15 years. Now, this is the point where it would be very nice to bring out a weighty tome and say, here's what I've done in these 14 years. Instead, I have these rather slender volumes, which make people ask, but wait, why did it take so long? I never have a good answer for this, except that I've always used time kind of as an editor, that things stay in my books if they still seem interesting to me over time. But in thinking about time too, as a writer, I also had that kind of writer's curse of, from when I started writing at 18 till now, in the very beginning, I would look at the back of a novel or a short story collection to see how old the writer was. I think some of you will admit such shameful incidents in your own life as well. And for a long time, everyone was older than me. And then suddenly they were not, they were all younger. And so this increased, I think, my worrying about time. And apparently, even as a child, I was this way. the night before I turned 10, I came downstairs crying to my parents that I didn't want to turn 10 because I would never be a 1-digit number again. So I began to think, okay, if I have this worry about how my time is passing and about each kind of marker of it, I'm about to come up on this milestone birthday, 50, and I thought, well, I'm going to spend all of the year 49, just telling people I'm 49, getting used to it. My friend had a party for me. I went around the birthday party. How old are you? I'm 49. I thought to myself, well, that's very clever. I've outwitted my own fear of this. And now when 50 comes, it will be nothing. A few months later, we were coming up on another birthday, my husband's. And I said to him, he's a little younger than me. I said to him in that long married way, how old are you going to be? And he said, 45. And I said, you can't be 45 because that would mean I'm 48. And then there was this long silence as we lay there. And then I was like, am I 48? And indeed I was. I was wrong. And I had the most thrilling sensation of a year being given to me, of it just appearing. And I remember that night just lying in bed thinking about how I had another year that I hadn't expected. I had this memory came back to me recently because in this strange year that we've all had, which has been full of so many losses, small and large, and so many instances of time that we didn't get to spend with people, or that we didn't do the things we had planned for. I remembered this story and I thought about how this was a lost year. And then I remembered that year I got back and I thought, I guess I broke even. Thank you.
You're lucky that you broke even. What do the rest of us do? Oh no. I did think, it's funny, your books are slim, but they take you some time to write. But isn't that sort of to write something really long, it takes you an hour? What's that phrase? To write a sentence or to write a paragraph, it takes you an hour to, whatever.
I think there's that famous, I think it's Samuel Johnson who says, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have enough time.
Yeah. Exactly. So I like to think of it in that respect. It's,
Okay.
It's to write something, a slimmer story or poets, they always, to perfect a few lines is difficult. So yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jenny. That was fantastic. And now we're on to our discussion portion. So before we bring all of the writers back up on stage, I'd like to bring Joseph Di Prisco, who is a writer and also the chair of the Simpson Literary Project. And he will be moderating our conversation with finalists with a special guest. So Joe, do you want to take it away?
Thank you, Erin. This has been fantastic. Joyce, do you want to join us here for a second? Joyce, are you there? There you go.
Yes. Wow.
Let me introduce. Do I need to introduce Joyce Carol Oates? Joyce Carol Oates is Joyce Carol Oates, and among many of all of her honors and all of her achievements, the one that we hold very dear is that she's been the inspiration for the Simpson Literary Project. And her recent books, I'll just call attention to a couple of them. This is a new book of short stories, The Other You, which I'm having so much fun reading. And then this major novel, Night, Sleep, Death, and the Stars, which is fantastic. So Joyce, thanks for joining us. Hope you had a good day today teaching.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Fascinating to hear these stories.
I know.
Each so different from the others.
I know, it's fantastic. So I guess we can all get back up on stage. Is that the idea, Erin?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Everybody, we're all here.
Writers, you can join the stage.
There you go. And Joyce and I'll have Joyce will have some questions. I'll have some questions. Not as many questions as on the SAT, but there'll be a few questions along the way. Happy Passover, happy Easter. It's March Madness, when we used to not know that women's athletics were completely disrespected by the NCAA. But here we are. We're trying to reach the Final Four when it comes to the baskets. We already have our Final Four for the Simpson Literary Project. A little thought experiment I had today. So what if some creature, some non-binary being from some faraway planet arrived and was given the recent works by our finalists? What would they think about this species? I guess they would think, well, this is pretty amazing groupage here. There's something about this species, very diverse, visionary, funny, brave, beautiful. That's amazing. And if that creature said, take me to your leader, I think we'd all say, what? No. Take a number. They're all leaders out here. So anyway, all to say, thank you so much for giving us such a feast for the imagination. And the stories were great. So to get into a couple of questions here, first of all, as you know, this is a prize for an emerged and still emerging author. And that is, so when you reflect, and I'd love to hear from all of you, when you reflect on your career, what have been the turning points? What has helped you to grow as a writer? I mean, who were your enemies? Who were your friends? Who were the people in your family who made a difference, who helped you to emerge? I can answer it myself, but and please jump in.
It's such a
Anybody.
profound question. It's a profound question, so they have to think about it.
But if no one's going to go, I guess I'll jump in. Thanks for the question, and again for including me in this incredible company. For me, it was my grandfather, who never got to be a writer, who I write about in my most recent book. He was the son of an immigrant, and his father said, no, we just got to this country. You can't be a writer. We have to make it a business. And this very old world guy, my great grandfather, and he forced my grandfather, who wanted to be a poet, to join in the family business, which my grandfather over 4 decades destroyed because he was a poet. So I think part of me, and I realized this in telling the story that I just told in this book, part of me, I think, became a writer to fulfill the dream he never was allowed to fulfill. And he died right before my first book came out. So he did, or actually no, before, right as I sold my first book. So he was in the hospital on his deathbed, actually, and I was just about to sell my book, and one of the last bits of communication I ever got with him from him was he wrote on a piece of paper and handed it to my dad. My dad handed it to me, and it said, "What did we get?" Which means that, how much did I sell the book for? So he was very practical, I guess.
Yeah. Anybody else want to jump in on turning points, or how disasters averted? I mean, how did you get here?
One of the things that was really useful to me in my early days as a writer is just that I was friends with a lot of other people who were at that early stage of writing, and many of them were actually in different genres than I was. So I was friends with poets, and I was friends with some graphic artists, and it was great because if you're hanging out with poets and graphic artists, no one is actually asking, what'd you get? How much are you going to get? The assumption is that there will be very little money in it, but that it might be a very interesting life. And one of the nice things about, being part of this community of friends was that I remember we had one envelope that we would pass $100 back and forth, whoever could pay someone else's rent or their utilities or whatever. And it was sort of, I think I was about 27, and it was that year where I felt like everybody started peeling off. People suddenly started being like, I got a job in advertising, or everyone would figure out something that was a little bit more seemingly viable as a way to make money. And it just meant so much to me to have these friends and this sense that we could just go over and spend an evening when we didn't have any money making soup for each other and talking about books that we loved.
Danielle, Lysley, want to weigh in here?
I mean, there are so many people who helped me when I was emerging. As you may have gathered from that story, I'm an only child, so my parents were very supportive of my sort of nebulous going into the arts. I had really excellent professors early on, but I think I didn't properly feel emerged until I had students. I think that's who made me feel like a real writer. I think when I saw their books go out into the world and was able to sort of chase their own influences and feel like I'd had more of an impact than my own work. I think that's what made me feel like a real writer.
I think for me, I don't know if it has to do with feeling emerged, but maybe feeling finally understood. I think for many years, my family didn't quite know what I was doing with my life. I don't think I knew. I'm not even sure if everyone in my family even knew I was doing an MFA. I think they just thought I was an organ for very mysterious reasons. And then floating around the country, just anywhere where I didn't have to work and I could, find some fellowship funds. But when the book finally came out, and it took a long time for my first book, the stories Monsters, to come out, my sister had told me that she had taken my mom to the Barnes & Noble in San Diego to go get the book. I'm in the Bay Area, I live in San Francisco. So she took my mom to Barnes & Noble, and my sister told me that as soon as my mom saw the book, she kissed it and she wept a bit. And that really meant a lot to me because my mother would not have been able to read the book. I mean, she spoke English well, but there was no way she could have read that book subtextually or even just on the surface level. But it meant so much to her that she could finally hold this thing. And I always think that, my mother loved a book that she couldn't read. And for me, that's its own kind of readership. And when she finally understood that, I've been doing something that sort of leads to this, it just, I don't know, it meant more to me than any readership. I mean, I appreciate any reader I can get, of course, but that meant more to me than almost anything, and in many ways still does, and is kind of what still gives me the energy to keep emerging, I guess.
Maganda, as we say, right?
That's
and
right.
Speaking of emerged, I guess on the East Coast, we have billions of cicadas about to emerge, right? In a few days. Oh my gosh, it's terrifying. But picking up on something Danielle said about teaching, let's talk. One of the cornerstones of the project is teaching. We offer these workshops. We're a nonprofit. We don't charge for our workshops. We subsidize the teaching. I wonder if you could reflect a little bit about your teaching, how you've grown as a teacher, or if we go in another direction, what's going on? What's life like for a young writer these days? You're all distinguished writing teachers. What's it like to be a writer these days in your class?
I think for me, social media has been a huge impact on the way new writers approach work, read work, critique work. In some ways that can be beneficial, but I've also seen the ways it can be constricting. Someone once told me that art is not a safe space. And the workshop has often lately in recent years been called a safe space. And certainly I want all my students to feel comfortable and to be able to feel respected. But I think it should also be a place of risk and a place of accepted failure. I was just talking to a writer today who said that failure needs to be a part of the path towards success. And I think because we've become so afraid to step out of our lanes, we're fearful of the possibility of hurting or offending somebody. I sometimes worry that's impacting a new writer's ability to think openly and expansively. So I hope that this idea of art not being a safe space, I'm hoping that that idea will continue in our classrooms, because I think it's important.
Such a great point. I totally agree with that, Lysley. And I guess going back to Joe's first question, something I learned about teaching is that you can actually teach writing. For some reason, there's this weird belief out there that, writing can't be taught, which I find completely baffling. And I wonder if it's because, people don't leave the MFA often, you don't come out necessarily as Toni Morrison or Leo Tolstoy, but that's not, I don't think that's the goal. I think if you were to judge a law school by how many people came out as Clarence Darrow, it would be equally dire. But I think we can really teach practical things to make someone reach her full potential, and there's some real value in that. And it's not just in publication either, although as Danielle said, it's one of the most gratifying things, I think, is when a student reaches publication. That's been such a thrill. But I think, part of just teaching people to express themselves and to learn how to sharpen their thoughts and then express those thoughts is something that's really valuable.
I think the longer I teach, the more time I spend just describing things, the more I move away from kind of judgment. And because I do think, because of that sort of inherent risk of failure, right? The first draft process never gets any easier. Every time you start something, you're starting something you've never seen before and don't know if you can do. And I tell my students that, like, that part I can't help you with. It will always be terrifying. If it's not terrifying, you're probably not working on the right thing. But the thing that gets easier, I think, in a way that feels related to teaching, is becoming a better editor of my own work. And I think that's partly because I can just sort of look at it and describe what I was doing to myself. And so that sort of trying to step outside of the story and just describe what I think I read and describe what I think its questions are and describe kind of where its narrative interests are and where its thematic interests are is what I do in the classroom and increasingly what I do editorially for my own work. And so I think that for me is the space of teaching. My very first graduate workshop, Elizabeth McCracken said, you're in a very useful workshop if 15% of what you hear is useful. And she didn't mean that as an insult, but I think like the skill you're there to learn to develop is which 15%. And I think that I try as much as possible to just describe what I see a student attempting. And sometimes I'm wrong, and sometimes that my being wrong is interesting, and then we can have a conversation about what they actually meant and where the communication didn't happen. But I do think that that a lot of the work that we're working toward is less about writing, because everybody sort of can write and everybody has a story to tell. It's about developing your own particular editorial sensibility, which may be wildly different than someone else's. And I do think, there's something, it's been, like 15 years since I was in graduate school. And I do think that there are some really exciting developments in publishing since then, as much as it's not at all like the world of publishing reflects the world that we live in, but it's closer. And I feel like there's less pressure on students to be the one writer of their ethnic background or the one queer writer, or, they're in conversation with all these other people who are doing weird and different things. And so I think there's a kind of, I don't know. I mean, I think my general perception of the 21st century is that like lots of gates are opening as the buildings are collapsing. So there's like it's sort of the good and the bad, but I do think that the good is that there is this sort of wider, wilder world of conversation happening. Whether it can survive long enough to I think that a lot of my students, not even just in their writing, but in terms of their visions of the future, are apocalyptic. And I don't know that I can sort of reassure them as much as I want to that the planet will survive, and the arts and culture industry will survive, and universities will survive, and all of the sorts of things that we are used to working towards. So I think that there's an enormous amount of anxiety, but there's also an enormous amount of joy and strange possibility.
Yeah, I really agree with that, especially, about the apocalyptic bent and that's sort of honestly earned right now. And so it's not something to talk your students out of necessarily. I've been teaching a lot of years, and I really love to teach. And I think one of the reasons that I find it useful for me is that I just feel like it's very easy to develop affinities, like I like this kind of fiction, or I like this kind of poetry, or I like this kind of thing, and to sort of in a way like ossify, your tastes become ossified, and you stay close to what it is that you do, or what it is that perhaps the people that you first admired do. And what I like about being a teacher is that my goal is to meet my students and help them write whatever story it is that they are most interested in writing. So I may have less interest in something that is a piece of historical fiction, but I'm very excited when they bring themselves to it and write it well. And I feel kind of like what my role is to not hammer the strangeness out of their work. I feel like when a writing workshop doesn't go well, it's because there's this convergence of trying to make it all a certain way. We've probably all had a teacher who tries to make you write, the way that they do. And so for me, there's just such joy in seeing the kind of variety of ways that they bring, their voice into the world. And to me, it's just very exciting. And I feel pretty lucky to sort of get that jolt in the arm of just newness from them, and at the same time to be able to talk to them about what it means to bring rigor as well as risk to the process of writing.
So when Joyce fills out, when she's asked her occupation, she lists teacher. And Joyce is a great teacher. And Joyce, I wonder if you have any. You and I taught a course together, and I saw firsthand what a marvelous teacher you are.
Well, I did have some questions or just some comments to make to the
Please.
writers.
Please.
So I think we're running out of time. But
We're good. No, we got about 15 minutes.
how many minutes?
About 15.
Oh,
No, maybe 12. Yeah.
okay. Well, I've been reading all your books, and I'm so struck by the kind of tenderness and attentiveness and this sort of instinct toward commemoration, where you are, first of all, you all seem to be writing novels of ideas, but the ideas are really beautifully evoked in very specific, vividly rendered scenes and kind of wonderful characters that surprise us and speak very, very, very convincingly. So I'm wondering if you feel, which is the way maybe I feel, that basically art is some sort of commemoration. I've noticed that, well, several of you have been writing about family members, say mothers, who were very close to a mother or close to a father. And this is some way to strike that universal connection that we all have by looking very specifically at what's in front of you and presenting it with a kind of love. Do you feel anything like that?
And as you answer, just if you could be as brief as possible, that would be fantastic. But yeah.
If no one's going to go, I guess I can go. Yeah, I will. I'll try to be brief, Joe. Nabokov talked about a book as you read a book when you have a throb that you can't otherwise satisfy or end the throbbing feeling. And so I wrote about my grandfather, I guess, because he was always a mystery to me. I mean, he left my grandmother and abandoned her totally to this awful alcoholism and hermitage, really. I mean, she was totally a hermit the last 30 years of her life. And no one blamed him because he was this charismatic, sweet-seeming guy. And so I couldn't get my head around that. So I had to write about him, really to know him. And then as I did it, I found, oh, well, actually, the hero of my family is my grandmother. And I only really learned that in writing the story. So I think it was commemoration, but also it was answering the question and sort of quieting the throb for me, and this mystery that had been pulsing in my life for my whole life.
Yeah, I think the word.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. I think the word commemorate feels pretty right on, at least for my novel, Son of Good Fortune. I think the whole trajectory of that book is for the protagonist to finally realize that no one is stronger emotionally, physically than his mother. And that really was the inspiration for the book. And I was thinking a lot about my mom. I'd lost my mom during the writing of that book. And as I was probably in that home stretch, I really realized that I really was trying to commemorate my mother in some way. The book isn't autobiographical at all, but it's emotionally autobiographical, like all our work. But it really was, it became a book about, and I don't even know if this is a word, but it's a word I held on to as I was finishing up. It's a novel about sonhood and what it means to be a son. Without parents, I don't know if I'm a son anymore. So I don't know, that's a critical part of my identity. I don't have kids. So it's left me wondering, if I'm not a son, what am I? So just really digging into what it meant to be a son and sonhood itself was central to the book and fueled very much by what you said, Joyce. I don't mean to sound cheesy, but it was very much fueled by the love for my mother.
I mean, I feel like what resonates for me with what you're talking about is also this idea of tenderness, which I find in, I was able to read some of everyone's work, and that was a quality that I felt like runs through it, and I think runs through all good writing, that ability to sort of, I guess, just go towards the thing that you're writing about and observe it with clarity, but also with compassionate curiosity and interest. And so for me, I love the idea that there's these certain states that we don't have names for, like sonhood, or I know I wrote in one of my books about how there's no word when you're married and when you're divorced. There's nothing for the in between. And I just feel like all of those moments, those little interstitial moments that we fall between expected emotions, for me are just where sometimes the most interesting writing is done, that I find in other people's work.
One of my favorite things about fiction, and I think the thing that is still true of fiction more than other storytelling forms, although there are many other wonderful forms of telling stories, is that it's really good at putting you in all kind of planes of time at once and putting you into moments when it feels like the past, present, and future are happening, and can capture the intensity of an emotion like grief, which is about the intensity of the present, but also about trying to reconstruct a narrative of the past, and also about the way in which the future has both become unimaginable and has to be imagined. And so I think that there's something about the kind of the compression of the form and what it asks us to do in terms of allowing things to happen simultaneously that are actually happening one at a time, that makes it a good space for that kind of commemoration or preservation.
Joyce, please, do you want to follow up, Joyce?
No, those are very beautifully stated. And I really felt that each of the books is like a window or even a door into a world a little different from my own, but with a lot of resonance also. And I was really surprised to hear some of your responses. We don't have time to talk about it in much detail, but wonderful, thank you.
So let me see, Erin, I think we could just look for some questions here. Is that it? I think
Yes, we have some questions from the audience.
We got it, some of that. We got it, some of these. Here's a question people are afraid to ask. Who are books for? Who are your books for? Who are the books that for the books you love?
I don't know if I think of who a book is for, but I think I do sometimes think of what it's for. And maybe that's because of just what books have meant to me over the years. And for me, they're about helping other human beings feel less lonely, and feel more of a sense that the best books to me feel like I'm having a conversation with the person who wrote it. And so I guess that's, sort of my fondest hope when I write something, that it will feel, that way to a reader, ideally.
Someone's just correct. It's whom are books for? Someone has just corrected me. So that's well, we got that straight. Now everybody can answer that question. Who the heck are books for?
Sorry.
Now I can answer.
Okay, I want to second what Jenny said. I think that to me, that's why novels age better than almost anything else. I mean, certainly writing ages better than, say, film, because you watch a movie even from the 50s or 40s, it seems dated, but you can read a book hundreds of years old and it seems like it's contemporary sometimes, because you're just plugging into someone's thoughts and you're having a conversation with Homer or Tolstoy or whomever, or someone in the recent past or the distant past. It often doesn't matter because you're actually getting someone's thoughts, and that, I think, is why it's such a powerful thing. And however much you might admire an artist in a different form, I feel like you feel like a writer in a way you don't know a painter or a musician, because you're actually getting some sense of who they are and you feel like they're in conversation just with you. It's such an intimate form.
Yeah, I mean, I tend not to think of books in terms of who, because I know that would never have been the intended audience for a lot of the books that I love. Like, writers could not have imagined me. And I think of that beautiful passage of Du Bois when he talks about, I sit with Shakespeare and he wins his not, that sort of sense of his being told, oh, this is not for you, and knowing in some way it wasn't for him, but it doesn't mean he can't decide that it is. And so I think a book is for anybody willing to have a conversation with that book. I do also tend to think of books as conversational. Also, I think that if I imagined other people reading my work, I'd never be able to finish anything. I mean, I think that the first task is always to trick myself into thinking I'm writing something other than what I am, and then be horrified once I get to the sort of moment where the story breaks open and realize what I've actually written, but it's too late that I'm committed. So I think I have to pretend I'm not actually writing anything and no one's ever going to see it until it's too late.
I think I'm just going to echo what everyone said. I think, well, especially in this day and age, I think books are for people who still know how and take pleasure in being alone, while at the same time being in the company of imaginary worlds and imaginary people. And that process ultimately just brings them back to a sense of community. We don't really know how to be alone anymore, and that worries me sometimes. And whenever I pick up a book, I remind myself, oh, I am actively being alone. Even if I'm in a room with somebody else, the fact that I'm engaged in a book, I'm actively being alone, yet at the same time participating in something that does feel communal. And I think that's what books, I think, have always been for, but it feels especially important now when being alone is such a hard thing to do.
Can I come back to something Danielle said, because I think it's really an important point that she brought up about who books are for, or whom books are for. Sorry, Joe. Yeah, I studied with E.L. Doctorow, and he taught our class Céline, the French writer who was a Nazi, and I really loved his book, his first book, and that book was certainly not for me because I'm Jewish, and he actually wrote essays that said people like me should be killed. But the fact that I got something out of that book, despite him, I think is sort of powerful. And so, I was talking to a student about this the other day, because she was saying she didn't want to read a book by an author because she thought he wouldn't have wanted her to read it. because of her identity. And I said that that's a valid way of looking at it, but in a way that means bigotry wins twice, because then you're sort of refusing yourself the lessons you can get from a great piece of work. And it's actually sort of a great revenge on bigotry if the person that the bigot didn't want to read the book gets something out of it anyway.
Joyce, any words from you?
To follow up on what Darren just said, it would be really analogous to, say, a great photographer. You know, you can look at the work of art without feeling that you would have had to have been accepted by this person. So those of us who are women are accustomed to reading all sorts of misogynist work by very great writers. And if we were to eliminate them from our reading, we would have, you know, like 3% of literature will be left for us. And that's obviously unacceptable. And that was actually a joke. Not quite that much.
Very sly, Joyce, very sly.
And one more thing, you know, speaking
Yes.
of jokes, I thought there were wonderful moments of really startling humor in the books also, that though they're all very serious and there are some tragic moments, nonetheless, there are a lot of sly little satirical insights and comic characters and darkly funny episodes. So I think we're all trying to do that.
Cut that out, you guys. No more of that from now on. Aaron, we're going to hand this over first in a second, but what I want to say is this was a lot of fun. I hope you had fun. This has been very revealing and interesting. I can see why your students love you. I can see why your readers adore the books you've written. And it's a great honor that you are finalists for the 2021 prize. And we will be back at you before you know it. Okay, thank you so much. And don't go anywhere, everybody. Wait there 1 second. Diane's on.
You're muted.
You're muted. You're muted.
Okay, thank you. Apologies. Thank you all. This is so great. I think what I'm thinking is just not enough time. There's so much more we could talk about. So, okay, we're going to need to end now, and join us, please, our lovely friends in Zoom land on May 5th. We're going to be in conversation with our Joyce Carol Oates Prize winner, another Zoom opportunity. And if you want to know more about the Simpson Project and keep up with us, please, we were very active on social, or we're getting even more active. And you can follow us on our website, simpsonliteraryproject.org. So thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everybody. Great meeting all of you. Stay safe.
Great job, everybody.
Nice to meet
Sorry,
everyone.
we can't be like hanging out in person after this, but it was lovely to hear everyone.
Yeah.
Everybody have a cocktail.
Yes.
Not gonna have it,
Or two.
Great job, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Yub nub, Leslie. Right? Yub nub.
Yub nub.
Isn't that Ewok for hooray? Hey, I did my research, man.
I don't have my Ewok dictionary here, but I'm gonna go look for it. And if I
Anyway.
learn important words, I'll let you know.
Okay. Anyway, it was a lot of fun.
Thanks. It was really fun. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao. Thanks, Aaron. You're the best.
Thanks. Bye.
How'd that go?
It went great. We're still broadcasting, just so you know.
Okay, so I love all the people here on the show, and this was great. And Paul, and thanks everybody for coming.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. All right. Bye.
Bye. Ciao, ciao.